I remember getting hit by the last wave. And as soon as I would come up, I would get knocked back down. And I finally just, I was exhausted. So I just gave in. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to die.
Mm.
And rather than panicking, which I'd been doing for all that time, I just felt this overwhelming peace. And I all of a sudden didn't feel like I was in water anymore. It just felt like space.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today we have Missy McNeill with us. She has had an NDE or an out of body experience and had other experiences since then and throughout her life. So we're going to talk to her about that. But thank you so much, Missy, for being on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Joe. I really appreciate this opportunity.
I generally always start the same way with most of my guests, and I look at your life and when the event happened. So again, as I told you before we started talking here, that I know some of what happened to you, but I don't know the specifics right now. So if you look at when it happened and you go before that, okay, it could be all the way to your childhood or just throughout your young adult life or when it would be. And I try to compare if you had the same mindset about life and the things that you now understand beforehand.
Well, I wasn't raised in a religious household at all. I think my mother was agnostic. It was never discussed, so I really couldn't tell you what she believed.
Mm,
Um, and I was raised by a single mom and had three siblings, and none of us were particularly religious. As a result, my brother and my sister both turned out to be ministers later in life, which was
oh
kind of
wow.
cool. Yeah. And I always had faith. I always knew there was something there, even though it wasn't preached in our house. Um, and so yeah, it we were left to our own devices where that was concerned.
Okay. So you kind of had, I was the same way. I didn't have a religion. I actually got baptized in my 20s, in my early 20s, just for the decision that I made with my sister. But before then, I wasn't anything. I didn't have any religion. I still feel that way. I still feel more spiritual than anything.
Me too.
But so you were kind of left to what you were going to decide as you got older, kind of thing.
And I even at a young age, I was trying to search. My siblings were much older than me, and my sister, for whatever reason, was drawn to religion. She actually became a Lutheran minister. So when she was 16 and driving, I was, gosh, eight, seven, six, seven, or eight. I don't know. She's 10 years older, so
Okay.
six. And she started taking me to church with her. I go to Sunday school with her and stuff. And all of us had an interest in religion on some level, and we all kind of got ourselves there. But when she was 19, she went off to the Air Force, and other than going to church with friends from time to time, it was never a responsibility or an obligation that I had. So it didn't become a routine or a part of my life. So, and I really couldn't understand. I tried to read the Bible before. I guess my ADHD kind of kicked in. So it was very hard for me to comprehend it. So I've really had to, I'd say my spirit guides and God have led me to learn what I know now. And it's very spiritual. It has nothing to do with religion.
Right. Were you a child or a young adult when the actual NDE or this close call happened?
I was 12. This
Okay.
was back, I'm aging myself. It was back in 1976. And my parents would take us every summer. We'd spend a month at a big beach. This particular year, we were at Cape Canaveral at Cocoa Beach in Florida. And it's a private beach. We're staying in a cottage. And my brother and I were fearless. And we would go out and ride waves in. We had a raft, and we did that every day 1,000 times. Well, it was hurricane season, which didn't intimidate us at all. So we'd still go out. And this particular day, we had gone out very far, and I'm sure probably the current took us a little bit, but we were still swimming out there. So we weren't afraid of how far we were going. The further, the better, because the waves seemed to be getting bigger.
Mm.
So we went to take a wave in, and my brother caught his, but my raft, the rope on my raft broke, and I lost it. I lost the raft, and I was 12 years old and 16 pounds. I was a little bitty thing, but I was a super strong swimmer.
Hmm.
thank God, because I was probably out there for an hour. And when I say hurricane season, I mean the waves were going every which way. Um, Now I'm able, because I know tides and from fishing and things like that. I know tides, so it was probably 2 to 4 feet, the waves, and they were,
Wow.
and like I said, they were coming from all different directions, and I just kept getting knocked under. And I fought it. I was getting disoriented, and I'd swim back up as soon as I'd get my bearings. And this went on. It felt like forever, but my brother, according to my brother, it was about an hour. And apparently, I was caught in a rip current. So the more I swam, it seemed like the further I was drawn back. I didn't know the rules about swimming with the current, and actually because of the roughness of the waves, I couldn't have anyway because I was getting smacked every which way. So after a while, I remember getting hit by the last wave, and as soon as I would come up, I would get knocked back down. And I finally just I was exhausted, so I just gave in. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to die.
Mm.
And rather than panicking, which I'd been doing for all that time, I just felt this overwhelming peace. And I all of a sudden didn't feel like I was in water anymore. It just felt like space. It was super comfortable. It was warm. It was safe. So it wasn't until years later I realized that this was my spirit probably coming out of my body. Um, all I knew was it was something I always remembered. Like drowning isn't that bad. I remember as a child thinking that, like, people drown and you think what a horrible way to go, but it was not bad at all. And so, yeah, that was my near death experience. And it didn't last very long. I would say I was really under, and my spirit left within a matter of minutes because I had a dolphin came underneath me and pushed me up out of the water. And this happened 3 times. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, it was very cool. And reflecting back, I remember when I was sinking and I was in this bliss, I remember thinking my dog is going to miss me. I had a little Scottish Terrier. And as soon as I had that thought, there's something very slick and very hard came underneath my feet and just shoved me up out of the water. And I realized later it had been a dolphin. But as soon as I got up out of the water, I was still exhausted. And so I sank back down. And this happened 3 times. And I think what happened was by the third time, it had propelled me out of the rip current
Hmm.
because I was able to swim back. And by this point, my brother was halfway to me. So we were able together to get to shore.
Wow. Okay. So a couple things. Thank you for sharing that. So
Yeah.
there's a couple incredible things there that I didn't realize. So you're saying a dolphin had pushed your body upward out of that current,
Yeah.
and that in turn kind of saved your life in a way
It did
because
save my life.
it,
It had to, because I had given up. I was
Mhm.
exhausted and I was perfectly happy where I was.
Wow. Wow. And
Yeah.
but then you gained the strength back to swim back to shore.
Mhm.
So were do we, I guess we can't confirm this, but we don't know at any point if you had gone unconscious, or do we know that?
The only thing I can say is when I felt like my spirit in reflection, I felt like my spirit left my body and I was in that peace. I would have to say that I was unconscious at that point because I don't remember anything but the darkness, the peace, the bliss. It wasn't until I felt that something slick under my feet that pushed me up that I snapped out of it. So I would say I was probably unconscious briefly.
Has the memory of that event become more clear as you've gotten older, or was it immediately clear when you came out of this, when you immediately came to shore and you that memory was there?
It was always very clear. The perception of it's changed.
Okay.
And to be honest, I didn't spend a whole lot of time thinking about it throughout my life. It was something that to me was remarkable. And I share it from time to time. But as far as the spirit leaving the body and that sort of thing, I didn't even know what that was. And I thought if I told anybody that that's how it felt, I would seem cuckoo. So
Hmm.
this didn't just come out until this last month or so. And I
Wow.
wrote a book. Now let me correct that. I wrote a book about the experience that I had that led me to all these spirits coming and visiting me. And I did mention it in the book about drowning. So, but
Okay.
that wasn't something personal saying one on one to somebody.
So you wrote a book later on. Okay, so from what I'm understanding, and I'm just trying to comprehend everything. You're 12 years old, you have the drown or the close call to drowning. You have the out of the near death experience, out of body experience. Did you feel like it was a dream, or did you know you had experienced, did you feel like you had experienced something different?
It felt more real than regular existence. I didn't at no point when I went from being conscious of this reality to sinking and feeling like I was in space and feeling that peace. It felt like I was home. It felt the most natural thing in the world. So there was never a point where I felt like it wasn't real. I knew it was real. I didn't understand what it was until many years later, but I knew what had happened to me was real. But the comprehension and the perspective were different.
Did you see your body at any point?
No, that never happened. It was just dark. It was very dark, and I've heard people call it the void.
Hmm.
Um, and like I said, it was very brief, but it was just this real sense of peace and bliss. It was amazing, but it was just sheer darkness, warmth, safety. I felt like I was home.
Did you still feel like yourself?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't think I did. I've never really given that one a thought. That's an
Mm,
excellent question. I'm going to think about that at
okay.
some point.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'd have to say yes, I felt different.
because you're saying it felt you felt like home, you felt
Mhm.
comfortable, you felt bliss, you felt all these good feelings, right?
Mhm.
But like in your day to day, right? We get up every day, we get in our car, we go to work, whatever we're doing, and we're kind of aware of our existence, whether we have to look in the mirror and say, "Oh yeah, there's Joe, there's Missy," whatever it is, right? We understand we've identified ourselves as this. And I'm
Right.
always trying to figure out when people have these experiences and they leave their body, if that I want to call it like an ID, like that identification of who we are, stays within us, or if we become something else. And I get kind of a mixed message with that when I ask people who've had NDEs. Some people feel like they become part, and I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but they become part of something even bigger than they are, but they also have an identity. So they can't, some people can
I had
comprehend
an
that.
identity. And, I'm thinking because my last thought before I was propelled up was about my dog, I was still somehow grounded here. Um, so I knew I was me and I knew I was Missy and I knew I was the little girl that was drowning, but I felt bigger. I felt fuller. I felt more fulfilled. The stressors and the problems and the worry about drowning and all that, they were gone.
Wow. So was the fear of death gone at 12 years
Oh,
old?
yeah. As soon as I was knocked down by that last wave, and I told you I just felt, I knew I was going to die. This is it. I was done. I had a long way to go to shore still. The waves were still rough, and I was exhausted.
Hmm.
In that moment, well, I'm dying. I'm going to die. There was peace. I never had a moment of fear. The only fear I had was while I was fighting the waves. As soon as I had relented and given in, it was it was immediate. There was no fear. There was no, panic.
So
It was
one,
almost as if God was taking me out of and saying, "Oh no, we're not going to let you suffer anymore. This was hard."
right. And that's a beautiful thing because I hear that happening when people are, uh, just before a car accident, often some of them will just jump right out of their body and see the accident happen. They'll kind of watch it occur. So
I've
they
heard
don't
that.
actually suffer the flying through the windshield or all these horrific things that
Right.
you can go through, which is terrible. But then so the type of person that I am is like, I kind of step back, and even though I would call myself spiritual and I have these beliefs and I've had my own experiences in my life to shatter my reality a little bit. So I have that, but then I try to look at both sides of it. So I'm always trying to investigate kind of like, I I think one of the people I interviewed one time, she said, I'm a truth seeker, I guess is what you're trying to find. I'm kind of like trying to figure out the truth. And from a
Right.
scientific side of it, or the person who's trying to scientifically make sense of this, they would say that we have these not endorphins, I don't know if it's the right word, but there's kind of like chemicals that are reacting as you're about to die, and it makes you feel happier, right? So that kind of like makes it like an easier process to die. And so I'm always like, okay, is that what you're feeling, or is it something completely earth shattering to this existence?
That is an excellent point because I've actually thought of that before I understood anything about NDEs or STs or any of that. I thought it was shock. I thought this is, and maybe it was, maybe they call it shock, but in reflection, my body, my spirit left my body because I wasn't feeling the same feelings. I wasn't experiencing the same experiences. I was in a completely different realm.
So the way that this is what I think I'm concluding. I'm still in the process of interviewing everybody who's gone through these things. Like I said, I haven't had an NDE, so which I think sometimes having someone who hasn't had an NDE talking to someone who has, it's interesting because I can kind of grab a hold of different questions that I'm thinking that maybe the audience might be
Mhm.
thinking as well. And I think I'm coming to this idea that the human body is set up in a way that when it comes time to cross over, that there are chemical reactions that happen within the body, just like anything, right? If we're hungry, we feel hungry. If we're, there's all these different sensations we get. So there's this sensation that helps the body shut down so that it's not too terrible of an experience. But then there's it's almost like birthing you into this other existence, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like it's taking you offline, and you're getting this kind of rush, but then the next thing you're over here. I say that only because there's some people who've had like this sounds awful, it's very morbid, but kind of a slower death, and it kind of moves in that direction. But then there are people who, might be sitting there and a car hits them right away, and they're here 1 second, the next second they're up in this different dimension with
In
their
the
Grandma
corner, yeah.
Sue and talking under a tree or something. Like it's like a completely like, where am I? So there isn't that shutting down of the body because it's such a quick transition. Whereas yours, from what I'm getting, and I think this is why in the beginning we were talking about whether it was an NDE. I do believe that is because you're on the brink of death. You're kind of getting,
Yeah.
but so you're slowly moving into that place, which was that dark void that people talk about. Does this make sense? I just wanted to kind of recap what I'm feeling. Does it seem like
Yeah,
that's
I
what you're
mean,
feeling?
it's a great way of describing it. I didn't, I, if you categorize it, I don't think I had a full NDE because it caught just prior, just pre-death.
Hmm.
I mean, it was at a point where I was about to inhale water. And so, but how the spirit works, how God works, how the spirit world works, I don't think they want us to suffer. I don't think that's part of the deal.
Mm.
So people that go through catastrophic things and dramatic things and accidents and things like that, I don't think that they suffer. I think the suffering comes if they survive
Yeah,
or the suffering comes prior to,
right,
but during, I don't think that that happens, at
right.
least not for me and just what I've heard.
Well, and the idea that we have this human body, we have this meat body suit, and then we have a spirit
Mhm.
body, right? If we have a spirit body within this body, then if the spirit body's awareness knows that that the flesh body is no longer going to be working or for you, then it would make sense for that spirit body to say, okay, here I go. I'm going to now leave this vehicle that I've been in through the time, right? And it sounds like you were right there where that spirit body was going, okay, well, that's going to shut down soon, so I'm going to start my movement outward.
Right.
And you didn't get to the point of seeing the light, or you didn't have your family come and greet you, or at least, I'm sure you've heard other NDEs at this point where some of them are pretty
Yeah, I didn't quite get there.
far over
Yeah.
there. Those are
Right.
usually the people that wake up and there's a toe tag on them. Those types of, you know what I mean? Those are,
Literally sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, literally, which is quite. insane that that happens. But so you were kind of just on the brinks of it. So here you are, 12 years old, you have that moment, you come back. Now you're saying that didn't change your spiritual mindset at that time right away? It didn't have an immediate effect on you?
No, well, it didn't change my mind because I didn't really have a mindset to begin with.
Hmm.
I had no belief that was strong enough for me to be able to say, well, I believe this, or I was spiritual, or I was religious. I just had nothing. Um, from that point now, though, I started getting visits from spirits. I started having more interest in finding out about God and reading the Bible and going to church and being a part of that. In fact, I craved it. I didn't know enough people that would take me to church with them or, kind of get me there after my sister left. So, but I think that was my path. I think it was my path not to know because the things that came later in life completely changed my perspective to a point where I know my purpose. I know who I am. I know the spirit inside of me. And I know that there are guides and angels and God that are with us all the time, every day.
Wow.
If I had a preset mindset, I know a lot of people that come in have NDEs that have religious backgrounds a lot oftentimes shift because it doesn't kind of line up with what they've been taught. I
Hmm.
didn't have a belief, so mine is very raw and very fresh, I think.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had spiritual type of encounters afterwards. Was that in your
Mhm.
adolescence or into your adulthood?
The first one, I was in my 20s. So I had a very chaotic upbringing. There was a lot of emotional and mental abuse. So I don't think I was ever able to connect and to be, authentic and really tap into my spirit. But once I would turn 29 years old and I was living in Hawaii with my children and we lived in this condo that was haunted. And again, it was a malevolent entity. It had to have been because it would trip me. When I would go down the stairs, there
Hmm.
was a second step, I would trip. Broke my toe one time trying to keep my balance. And it would make horrible sounds in the middle of the night. Doors would slam where there were no windows open. They would My kids would hear my voice saying, "Kids, I'm home," or "Hey, I'm home," and there was no one there.
Hmm.
They would hear doors open and close. I mean, it freaked everybody in the house out. I had
Ex-
roommates and they were, one of them left. She went to California and she said, "Get that out of here. I'm not coming back until you do."
Wow.
Um, yeah. And so, but I was a hearing specialist and I had a client that, God, for lack of a better word, kind of a voodoo doctor.
Hmm.
Um, and he had this pendulum. When I broke my foot, I had a boot on. And he had come into my office for an appointment and he had this pendulum and he spun it over my toe. And he said, you didn't trip and you weren't pushed. You were pushed, rather. And he said, they call it menehune or malevolent ghost in Hawaii. And she's jealous of you. And
Hmm.
I kind of proceeded to tell him some of the experiences that were happening there. And he said, well, we need to get you exercised, get that house exercised. But his wife wouldn't let him do it because apparently these spirits can attach to you. So she was afraid if he went to do that, it would attach to him and he'd bring it home to her. So, but I believe it attached to me because it was a long time before anything good really happened to me in my life. So I really believe that now knowing what I know, that it attached itself to me.
I've heard stories similar to this, and I think this is why it's really important for people to establish some type of connection to who they really truly are. I don't want to say spiritual connection or religious connect because then I'm saying I'm kind of pushing people in a direction. But what I'm saying is, even if you're someone who just believes in a higher self or a higher something, it's good to be aware of it because life gets busy. Here you are, you said like I'm listening to your story. You're in Hawaii, you got kids, you're busy, you're 29 years old. Like that's busy time of life, right? I'm around that time in my life. I know how busy it can get. And I think a lot of people are going through their life and they're so busy, they're not paying attention to what's actually going on around them. And that's when you can get caught up in that, right? Because you said it was stuck. It felt like it was stuck with you, the spirit.
Yes, I didn't know who I was. I was a very lost soul. And I believe that I carried a lot of negative energy myself, and I might have a lower vibration.
Hmm.
I was very lost. So I think it was easy for spirits like that to attach to me. I think it may have happened more than once. But understanding your higher self, or being able to tap into your spirit guides and things like that, I was so far from that.
Hmm.
Um, so I believe you have a good point as far as understanding that, because now I I don't worry about that. I've had dark energies, try to attack me in these realms, and I was always protected. I always felt safe. I always felt bliss. I always felt loved. It was just during that time. And like you said, knowing my higher self and knowing my true purpose and all that kind of thing would have made a difference.
Yeah, because then
I
you're
think I was just
then you're kind of aware of what something could be, whether you at any way may think it's woo woo, but at least it's something that someone can grab a hold of. Because what I mean is, if you have nothing to grab a hold of, if you have nothing going on, then you're actually become victim to everything you're feeling. You're not really aware. It's like your awareness isn't on. So you're just keep repeating cycles and those types of things. And I just think as soon as people start to become more aware of that, I remember when I was in my early 20s, and I was going through some stuff, and I had talked to someone who's I would consider more spiritual than I was, and they said, just say when you go to sleep every night, please protect me with, as much protection, white light, just surround myself with white light, surround yourself. And I had no idea what any of that meant, but I remember every time I did that, it felt comforting. I remember just feeling, okay, good. I'm protected. I have my soldiers around me that are protecting me for anything that's, gonna be bad for me. And it gave me a sense of belief of some sort, even though I was kind of still confused about things in life. But it almost felt like a shield against anything that was trying
right.
to come into my energy. You know what I mean? So I just think it's wise to have those things, even if you don't know exactly what you're believing in. I think a lot of people get caught in just there's so much out there, they don't know what to believe in. If you've had an
Right.
NDE or an experience, it's a lot more easier to say, wow, well, I had this experience. I have something to kind of grab a hold of. Some people don't get that at
Right.
all. They're just kind of going through the suffering of life or through the things in life.
Hmm.
So it's nice to just
You
create.
described that perfectly.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was. Just life was living me.
Hmm.
I was going through the motions. I was doing what I thought I was supposed to do, what other people did. I had to be married and have kids because that's what normal people did. I had a decent career, but there was no fulfillment. There was no purpose. And it wasn't like I was being guided to anything. I was literally going through the motions of life,
Hmm.
and there was no fulfillment. I mean, here I was in Hawaii in this spiritual, beautiful place. And I really, other than really seeing the beauty, physically seeing the beauty, I couldn't take it in. And I know there's so much more. I mean, I was visited by Menehune. So there was obviously deeper things going on there that I could even wrap my head around. And I didn't put a whole lot of stock into it. I knew I was haunted. My kids knew it happened. My roommates knew it happened. They were all experienced it. But it was just kind of like a thing, and
Right.
never really put any more thought into it until later in life when other things happened.
Right. Did you, so when do you feel like, just a question, when did you feel like you kind of got more hold of your spiritual senses of who you are? Did you have any type of, some people go to do an ayahuasca ceremony, or some people have, they
That's
start,
on my agenda, by
oh,
the
is it?
way.
Oh, is it?
I'd
Well,
like
that's a
to
big
do
one. That's a big one. I don't know. I always say I don't think I'll do that until I
that.
don't know. I'd have to be on death's
I'm
doorway, I think.
committed.
It's a
Yeah,
that's a tough thing to do, but I've heard some amazing things that people have done with that. So, but yeah, did you have like a moment when that really struck you the most, when you started kind of waking up
I
from
did. And
everything?
it actually came a year and a half ago. Now, I had a whole lot of really intense experiences between the ages of 50 and now. that were extreme dimensions, spirits, channeling, all that sort of thing. But I had a spiritual awakening about a year and a half ago, and this was while I was healing from this PTSD, and I was just starting to integrate all the things that had happened to me. And I really was in panic attacks throughout the day. They were constant. And I remember about 6 months into this therapy, I was walking past the building that I had therapy in, and it was like I walked from one dimension into another because as fast as I was having a panic attack and I was ruminating and I was panicking, when I took that next step past that doorway, it was like I became a whole nother person. I felt peace. I felt love. I felt connected to the grass and the trees, every human being. It's a feeling that continues to motivate me to find out who I am and to learn more about the spirit and about my purpose. And it's taught me to love. When I felt that second, I knew that came from God. It came
Mm.
from a whole nother place. And I felt so blessed that they did that for me because I was struggling hard. But every time I ever went into any kind of serious suffering, they came and rescued me. There was
Mm.
always that kind of overwhelming peace. But this particular moment was life changing.
Wow.
I I remember going home because I had isolated myself too, by the way. I had my panic attacks had become so bad. I just couldn't be around people. PTSD was terrible. After that moment, I just felt love for everybody. I wanted to connect. And I was able to forgive my abuser and the family.
Mm.
Um, because everybody has their path and everybody comes from where they come from for whatever reasons. And it's not my job to judge. It's not my job to, my job to protect myself, but now I know how. I wasn't given the tools to do that in my life. I was exposed to that sort of treatment. So to me, that was normal. Um, if it weren't for my guides and for angels and for God and for this experience, I would still be in the same, I'd still be as lost as I was. But they wanted me to know that. And like I said, I just felt very blessed. And from that moment on, my life is it's amazing. I have a beautiful life. And the spirits are still here. I don't see them like I used to. They don't, make themselves visible. The entity that channeled through me hasn't been back, but I feel like they were there when I really needed them the most, and they guide me now in my consciousness.
That's amazing. So, which makes sense for them to be around you, all, or you're aware of them all the time when you're in kind of that space that you need them. So it's almost like they're kind of watching you now. Like that they're still around you,
Yes,
but
and I feel that.
you're just aware they're, because you're in a good space, unless you actually need them, which I think even some people can channel their guides all the time and they can kind of become
I
more in
know I'm working
communication with
on it.
them. Yeah, yeah. So I don't know
Yeah,
how to do it myself either, but you mentioned a few interesting things. You said between now and I think you said, I don't know if you said the age of 50, you had a
yeah.
number of spiritual experiences. Do you mean
Mhm.
or dimensional experiences or different things? Did you ever were these during like sleep moments or did you actually see have you seen things or anything? Or I don't know if you're wanting to share any of that, but
Yes, yes.
um you have. So
Oh, sure. I mean, I honestly have never heard anybody have a trauma-induced spiritual experience like that. I was literally sitting and being gaslighted and being sort of verbally attacked by this person that I had gotten involved with and was living with. And I felt the hand of God touch my shoulder. And I just remember looking over and I could see it. It was translucent. It was huge. Just the warmest, most comforting, loving, safe feeling I'd ever had. And it took me kind of away from the abuse that was going on. In that moment, I literally just dropped to my knees and started weeping. I knew who that was.
mm,
And I'm thinking, wow, what did I do to deserve God coming and touching me? and to give me that peace in that moment that I was so overwhelmed. I had been going through this for about 3 years at that point, and the torment was getting worse. It was a whole family cult, and it was getting to a point where they, I mean, they were trying to brainwash me and make me submit. So there was a lot of torture involved. And I think rather than having a nervous breakdown, my God's, and I think because I was already tapped into spirit world without really knowing it because of my other experiences, I think they came through like literally where I was able to see them. They took me off to different realms too. After God touched my shoulder, I was literally taken into another realm with this little entity, a little being, as I call them little fellers,
Hmm.
but they were there to protect me. And I remember it was another occasion where I was right in the middle of being tormented and verbally attacked and physically attacked. And I had gone in my room and I was just drawn out into this realm. It was dark. It was almost like a theater setting. And there was this little entity that was had for the first thing they said to me was, "Don't be afraid. I'm here for knowledge, kindness, and love." And I didn't feel afraid. I felt very safe. I realized that I was someplace that I wasn't familiar with and I didn't understand it, but I felt incredibly safe. And so I just listened, and they were telling me telepathically, but she would, and I call her she, it seemed like a she to me, writing on this whiteboard with this pointer. She was so tiny, but this board was huge. And she was writing words to heal me, self-love, forgiveness, understanding. Uh, and the words became so, there were so many of them, she started having to write off the whiteboard onto the floor and the walls. And it was like I wasn't even getting it. I was still trying to figure out, where am I?
Mm.
What's going on? Am I here to learn how to heal him? And that was my initial thought. Um, it was it was a surreal experience even in it.
Hmm.
Even though it felt natural, I knew I was out of my element. And so I remember saying to this little feller, "I'm never going to remember all this. I'm going to be more screwed up trying to remember all this and apply it than if I just never knew it at all." And the entity said, "You don't have to. You don't have to remember it. It's with you."
Mm.
And then I was sort of carried off to another realm. It was remarkable.
I'm, it's not shocking to me at all. And in fact, I think a vast majority of the soul inspired audience is listening has either experienced something similar or heard of things like this before.
I would
So
love to hear about it.
yeah, I've done polls with people that follow the show, and a lot of people have had experiences like this. They don't necessarily have NDEs, but they've had and actually
Spiritually transported.
yes, exactly. And in fact, I've had a few interviews where trauma was a huge piece of it. Um, there was either a trauma event happening, and much like the NDE, and this is the way I look at it, much like the NDE, where your body is close to shutting down, it's close to being at its time of its seizing.
Right.
The spirit says, okay, well, I'm going to go to that next place. I think when you're in a high amount of trauma, or even whether it's mental, physical, whatever it may be, there are times I think where your internal spiritual body decides to take a trip to either reduce the um,
Trauma.
yeah, the trauma. I think sometimes it has more knowledge than our physical body and
Mhm.
says, I don't want you to face this, so we're going to jump out for a bit. So like a lot of people have had these moments and they come back after this traumatic event and they go, what just happened? Like where was
Yes.
I? I didn't even experience how bad that was. That should have been horrific, but I didn't really experience it as horrific as it was. So it kind of, I don't know, we don't need to know the details of what you were going through and everything, but it sounds like it was your spirit body was doing something similar where it was like, no, I don't want to deal with that right now. That's what I
Well, I
gathered.
was actually asked the question at one point, and this particular being I didn't see it. It was just, there's just a knowing. And it had asked me, do you want to stay?
Mm,
So I was actually given the choice. And I remember, and I was in a place of peace and love. I could see my body, my spirit body looked very similar to me, but it was more of a haze. And I remember thinking, no, my purpose is to heal him. I was still very deluded. And I think a lot of the trauma bonding and things like that. And because it was happening while I was there,
hmm
that I got it mixed up. And I thought, well, all this knowledge that I'm getting is to heal him. Because I had asked them, why aren't you giving me information to heal me? Well, they were. I just didn't figure it out for a very long time.
hmm
And their response to me was, because you're going to be fine. So
It's interesting that your spirit body or your consciousness or whatever it was that was having these thoughts was feeling of healing him, being the person causing the trauma. Am I
right,
okay?
yes,
I would, I'm not saying, so I'm gonna say something about that, and I don't want to step out of line with this because I'm trying to understand this, but this is what I see and that happens in life is that I, I don't believe that you were there to heal him, but I do have the belief that the people who or individuals who cause trauma to people are learning through the destruction they're causing. I'm trying to say that in the right way. So, unfortunately, you were the person that was there dealing with that, right?
I was the supply.
You were
Yeah,
this, right? And, but somehow you are in a way healing him because he's learning, right? And I know that sounds, it gets very like, and I have to be careful what I'm saying because I don't want to say that we're in this world to be traumatized and to go through
no,
awful experiences for the sake of other
I get
people's
where you're
learning.
going, and I believe you're 100% right.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that there's kind of like this duality that's happening that, you're either the victim or the victor and but we don't have to be the victim, right? And that's part of what we're learning as well. We're learning to, okay, we did this experience, let's not do that again. And what did I learn from that experience? And then to go to the next experience. That's just my
I have a
feeling.
lot of gratitude for that experience now. Had
Hmm
it not been for that, my life wouldn't have been transformed, and I wouldn't have had I wouldn't have had the experience that I had in order to heal. It opened my eyes to the lies that have been told to me in my life, and not intentionally, like with my parents. They didn't tell me anything because they didn't know. They didn't have it to offer. Um, so I was told things, you're not a good person, you're not worthy, that sort of thing. And I realized through the spiritual awakening and all those pieces, I am a beautiful human being. I'm a beautiful spirit. I'm created in love.
hmm
And everybody, including my parents and the abusers, deserve love.
hmm
Whatever brought them to the place that they're at, they deserve forgiveness. Had it not been for the experiences that I had in life, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I can't tell you how much gratitude I have for that.
hmm I think sometimes I love that. I think sometimes people are afraid to feel that way towards people who harm them. It's a very difficult thing to do to give forgiveness and things like that because possibly they're thinking, well, if I am okay with that, then then I'm gonna keep having this happen to me. But I think it's actually the opposite. I think the moment you forgive and understand that these people have a lot of learning to do, you respect yourself and you find, okay, I don't need to do that again. And it actually is harder for those people to then attach themselves to you because you're such a forgiving person. They're no longer are going to be, oh, okay. Because they're seeking the validation that you are being tormented, right? But if you're saying, hey,
Well,
story,
they want a
yeah,
reaction. They like to be able to provoke. They like to be able to create an emotion in you that they dictate.
that's right.
So you are 100% right. And, the way I used to respond, at least early on, was getting defensive and arguing back and fight, standing up for myself until I got to that point, really with the spirit's guidance. Don't talk at all. There's nothing to say because what they're saying is all lies anyway, and you're getting into a loop that is going to go nowhere.
Right.
And they gave me all this information throughout the process, which guided me to my escape.
Hmm. Wow.
So they
Well,
were so is I love where you're going with this because the fact that you get it, it means so much to me because I mean I really haven't been able to talk to a lot of people about it, but it's such a bizarre thing,
yeah.
and to understand that there's a purpose for that,
Hmm.
and people that have NDEs, I've heard them say before our soul came to this earth, that was part of the plan.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier on that you had a book. Did you do you talk about these things in your book? I'm just wondering what the book
I
was.
do. I
Okay.
do. When I decided to write the book, it was actually my therapist that said, you need to write a book because
Yeah,
this is a
yeah.
very rare story. I mean, it's something that a lot of people go through, but I went through it all and I went through it for 6 years. So, and she said, you're the kind of person that wants to help people. I think it would help to write a book and do it that way. Because I was, like I said, I was very isolated and still very introverted, shy. So I wasn't able to get the message out that way. So writing this book was very cathartic and liberating. But to start, I started flowing back into these panic attacks because I felt
Mm.
like I was reliving it. So it was a very difficult book to write, but by the end of it, I felt liberated.
Mm.
I felt healed. I wasn't afraid anymore. And it's just getting better and better all the time. And I'm able to reflect on where I came from and my life today. So I might, on the outside, look like I just have an average life, which I do. I'm a very simple person. I do simple things. I draw, I make jewelry. I have hobbies, and I just live my life. Um, I believe in the spirit realm, so I do my sage every day and my candles, and I even started smoking cigars just for the negative energy part of it. Um,
Nice.
so anything I can do to kind of stay connected. But this book was definitely I didn't realize how transformative it was going to be until I finished it. So
And
yeah,
what is the name of the book?
it's called. You want to see it? It's called
Yes,
Cabin
actually.
in the Mountains.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was 5,000 feet up on a mountain, Sugar Mountain in North Carolina, and it was all private land. And of course, I didn't realize for a year that I was there, it was like a compound. The whole family was living, all the people that lived in those houses were all immediate family. And they never divulged that to me until time went on and I started to learn that's the mom, that's the dad, that's his wife. I'm now his wife, but now he's still married to this woman who's living with the dad. It was a creepy dynamic, but
Wow.
it all kind of came to fruition over the years.
And sorry, is there like a website you have or somewhere where people can find that
I
book, or
have
is
a
it just
website. It's called findingyourwayhomeatlast.com. Findingyourwayhomeatlast.com. It's got some glitches right now, so I've got my publishers working on correcting them. So it should be up, I'd say by the 10th was the deadline.
okay?
Otherwise, you can reach me through Facebook at Mila, Mila Johnson. And I don't know if you want my email or not, but those are the three points. I have YouTube and Instagram and all those too. I've got all the platforms. I just
Yeah.
don't use.
No, I'll put that all in the show notes so people can have the ability of either connecting with you or getting the book or looking at the book. It's beautiful. No, I like the way you said that. This is one big thing for me. Again, I feel like I sometimes repeat this a lot in my episodes, but I'm going to say it again. I'm a musician. When things come through me, I put it to music. And then eventually, when I feel like certain music has to be heard, I release an album. I don't care about being the next Michael Jackson or whatever. Like, I just want to release the music. It has to be released. It's
Follow
like
your art.
energy going through us, right? And here you are talking about your life experience. You write this book. You went through PTSD through writing it because you're re-experiencing the traumas, the things that you went through, or all the different experiences you had that'll bring up things. But then to release it, you're taking the energy and you're releasing it. And I think that's why people that do journaling, all these different things, I think that's so beneficial because you're acknowledging what's inside of you. If you don't acknowledge what's inside of you and you just keep it there,
It stays there.
it stays there. It's got nowhere to go. And
Yeah.
So it's a good habit to get into. So when people say, oh, they wrote a book, people, no, you need to write a book. I think everybody could write a book, write
Right.
your life story. So I love that.
If I could say anything, my therapist, she was big on that, big on journaling. And because I couldn't do it early on, I couldn't, because everything I wrote was, I felt like I was reliving and it was just too hard. Um, so I kind of poo-pooed it and told her, well, I'm not going to do that. It's not working for me, that sort of thing. And until I really sat down and started writing the book, and realized there is so much power in journaling.
Mm.
And if you can get past the fear of the reliving it, that's the healing. It's got to come up to come out. So if you have the courage to do that, then you're going to heal.
The last thing I always ask everybody, I always try to ask everyone at the end, this is your own personal feeling around it, right? Is what do you feel like our main purpose is to why we come here?
I mean, I'm going to say what my first guy told me. That was knowledge, kindness, and love. I believe that that's all of our purpose, is to really enjoy life, embrace it, learn, and wisdom are, I think, the biggest ones besides love. The more we learn, the more we can offer each other, the more we can gain personally. And to learn to forgive and love. I believe that's all of our purpose. I think people go, we're very self-serving. We want things, and, we want other people to change and people to do what we want them to do and act the way that we want them to act, rather than accepting everybody for the individuals that they are and forgiving their behavior because it's not like yours. There was a girl that had said something on one of the podcasts I just loved. And she said, don't judge others because they don't sin the same as you do.
Mm.
So I thought that was pretty profound.
And maybe at some point that helps our spirit grow.
It just makes it easier to really be able not only to relate to other people, but to feel good about everybody. I mean, if someone is in a bad mood, or if someone is actually a narcissist, or someone is, you know what I mean? They have their way. I don't get a sense of resentment. That's their path. And I pray they heal.
Yes.
I don't have to live in it too. I can pass that on to the next person that it wants it.
Thank you so much for coming on today and telling us what happened. And we dug a little bit deeper than possibly you have before. I don't know, but
I did. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it so much. I can't tell you. I watched your podcast before and you're amazing. I hope to see it grow and grow. You're so humble and charming, and I really appreciate it. And you made this a lot easier than the first one, because that was my first one. So
right.
I really appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming out and just telling everyone your experience. So I really do. I also turn to everybody. I say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to The Soul Inspired. That's how we will grow. If you know somebody this will help, make sure you send it their way too. So thank you again, Missy, for being on The Soul Inspired. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate you.
So